Dan O'Dowd, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you, sir?
Jason, how are you? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you today.
I'm doing great. So glad that you're here on the show today. We like to talk sports. We like to talk faith. Glad that it's baseball season and you got this current role with MLB Network. How many years has it been that you've been doing this broadcast work?
Oh my God, you start out with a hard question because you're going to make me recall something. I left the Rockies in 2015. So this is going on my 7th year now doing it. God, it's gone by so quickly too. It's amazing. Your parents tell you get to a certain age in your life and life's going to fly by. You don't believe until you get to that age. And it's been, it's been a pleasure. It's been a great experience for me to be able to transition from, working for teams, Orioles, Indians, and Rockies, and being on that treadmill to get off of it, but still get an opportunity to talk about the game of baseball, but at the end of the day, not care who wins and loses the game. It's been a great change.
When you first came to MLB Network, did you see broadcasting as sort of temporary, or did you see and know that this is where the Lord was going to take you for 7-8 years?
It's interesting story, Jason. I found it interesting. You might find it boring, but I left the Indians at the end of 1998. And so I was in between at that point in time. And one of the opportunities that was presented to me was to do this exact same role, but back then was at ESPN.
Yeah.
So I flew across the country. I was living in Cleveland at the time. And I did an on-air interview with Carl Ravitch. And I think the producer was a guy named John Schneider.
Yeah.
And the head of talent, oh my God, he's like a famous guy at ESPN. Anyway, I did well enough that they actually offered me the job. It's like 60 some dates a year. But, I just hadn't gotten the total itch out of my system yet at that time. I was still really young at that time to, try to do more things in the game of baseball. So I turned it down, much to my wife's chagrin, because she looked at the quality of that life and she loved Cleveland. She didn't want to leave Cleveland. And she looked at the quality of life that she had been exposed to so far in the job that I was doing with the Indians and went, this is no brainer, Dan. But it was for me. So I didn't end up taking the job. So anyway, I think I was predisposed to pursue this at some point in time in my life.
Was Al Jaffe the talent guy?
It was Al Jaffe. It was Al. Correct. Yep.
Yeah. I've known
great
Al.
guy. He was really disappointed that he didn't take the job. I think he thought I had a great future in the industry. And, some days I look back and think maybe I should have taken the job.
Well, you went 15 years as a general manager with the Rockies after not taking that job. So that kind of worked out as well, right?
It did. 15 years in Colorado, those 45 in normal years anywhere else.
I got to tell you, our Sports Spectrum ministry, if you will, is based in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. I'm sure you know what that is. Yep. And so absolutely. I go out there. I live in Connecticut, but I go out there about once a month. And it's the most roller coastery type of weather you would ever see. I've been out there in May and it snowed. I've been out there in January and it was 75 degrees. And I thought, but it's so beautiful. But I'm curious because you said it feels like 40 years instead of 15 in the time that you were out there. What do you mean by that? Do you mean that in a good way, or do you mean that it was just a lot based upon the work that you were doing as a GM?
Two things. The GM role is just an incredibly all-encompassing role. If you're going to do it, you're emotionally so ingrained into every detail of it. Unfortunately, it kind of becomes your second God, which is a problem, with the role. And then, not to digress too much, but I was a director of player development with the Indians when I first started my role in Cleveland, and we had our AAA team was in Colorado Springs. So I felt like I had some exposure to what I call altitude baseball. Really naive to think I had any kind of knowledge that really understood what I was getting into. And it wasn't long into the job, probably 12 months into the job. And I was like, oh my gosh, everything that I felt like I had learned up to that time in my formative years with the Orioles and the Indians, none of that roster building and team player evaluation kind of work there. And so it was emotionally, it was intellectually challenging, which was a good thing, but it got so intellectually challenging at many times it felt overwhelming. And I have no doubt I ended up there because God had a plan for me to take me right to my knees and knock me off my horse and blind me. So I went through some Paul moments there that really shaped my life, because it's a Rubik's cube that I'm not sure anybody will figure out. I sure humbly, I never figured it out. So when I say that it was like 45 years and 15, it's because it lacked any sense of predictability.
Hmm.
And so when you're involved in any kind of passion and there's no predictability to it, you really it becomes emotionally challenging in many, many different ways. And then on top of it, Colorado was challenging itself. The climatic swings, as you talked about, that it led to same climactic issues that you're dealing with in your profession all the time. So that's why I say, it was like 45 years wrapped up into 15.
Yeah,
So
that's a
someday
lot.
when I write a book, I'll explain it in more detail.
Yeah, you got to
So
write the
I'm going to
book,
call
man.
the book. Yeah, I'm going to call the book baseball at 90. I think it's baseball at 90-20, which is the 80-20 is how many feet above sea level course field was.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of those Paul moments, right? Where you're on your knees and just crying out to God. Maybe take us through the progression of your faith a little bit. And if you want to share any of those moments, go for it. But I think just knowing your journey and hearing your testimony would be a wonderful thing.
yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in a very staunch Roman Catholic family. Went to St. Pius X in my formative years of school. So my thoughts and ideas are based upon God were based upon Catholicism. Went to church every Sunday. It was sacrilegious if we didn't go to church every Sunday. No matter what we got out of church any Sunday, we went to church every Sunday. And honestly, I mean, it gave me a great foundation of understanding right and wrong. And so that was really what I thought religion and faith was all about. It wasn't until I really got to Colorado, and then I was introduced to Kelly McGregor, the late president of the Colorado Rockies, passed away tragically at a very, very young age. He really introduced me to Christianity. But it really wasn't until I failed what I would consider earthly failure in my job. But there was a sense of uneasiness long before then. Like we had great Cleveland teams starting in 1994 through my last year there in '98. I mean, we're great. We weren't real great
World
prior to
Series
that.
teams, 2 World Series teams.
Yeah, I mean, just great teams. But so you chase that in your job. You chase those moments. And when you get to the end of those moments and you still feel completely unfulfilled based upon those moments, and in more of a sudden realization of, oh my God, I got to do this all over again. Oh my gosh, what does this really mean? I begin to you begin to get this unsettling in your heart that there's something more to it than what you think there is. But life's going so quickly. You're married, you have kids, you're trying to succeed in your job. I ended up interviewing for 3 jobs that year, and I was offered all 3 in Seattle, Milwaukee, and Colorado. And I was drawn to Colorado, but I was probably drawn for a reason I didn't understand at the time. Probably should have taken one of the other 2 jobs as it relates to a baseball standpoint, because when I got to Colorado, it was all about me. I figured this was my time to make. I'd had an unbelievable working relationship with John Hart. I mean, incredible. Never really duplicated it again in my career, what we accomplished, I thought, collectively in Cleveland. But I thought, okay, this is my time now. And boy, it really wasn't. And I got knocked hard off the saddle, because everything that I felt like I knew or I thought my life represented, it's just, I had no feeling of any sense of purpose or meaning to it whatsoever. And so that's why, Kelly came into my life and tried to start slowly to explain to me, I think you're chasing the wrong things, and here are the reasons why. But it took me some time to really figure that all out, Jason. I don't think there was no one, get knocked off and be blinded, not being able to see. It was accumulation of God, just like, really working on my heart to realize I had such little control of the things in life that I thought I had control of.
And then did you see people starting to come into your life that were like-minded, that you could learn from, that you could bounce things off of? I'm thinking of, those Rockies teams, and we've had Clint Hurdle on this show, and I know how devout he is in his faith. I just think about other people that might have been entering into your life during this time when you're
Yeah,
starting
there
to
were,
learn more. Yeah.
yeah, there were three people, Kelly, Clint, and a guy named Bo Mitchell,
Yeah,
who
sure.
was, yeah, I know you know Bo. And, I think what they all did was point out that it's not about he doesn't want you to have a relationship with him based upon fear, rules, or guidelines. He wants you to have a relationship with Christ based upon love. But it's a relationship, so it's a friendship. So it's good and bad, and it's ups and downs, it's life. And I think with those guys, they were kind enough to love me enough to point out all the issues in my life that I needed to address. But they didn't necessarily help me address them, because ultimately what they taught me is that the only way you change in life is if you want to change yourself. I mean, people can point issues out, but at the end of the day, you have to be the one to take responsibility to face your own demons and try to deal with that the best you can. And honestly, I mean, that's a daily battle. I mean, I don't know if that'll ever leave me. When I take my last breath on this earth, I don't think I will ever have won that battle. I don't think God, I have this, I talk about it, this 80-20 rule that God creates all of us with 80% of the most wonderful things in life, but he leaves the other 20% of baggage to remind us that this world is not all end to be end, and that we're never going to figure out the other 20%. I think my wife likes to remind me that for me, it's more like, was like 20-80 and then 60-40. And I keep reminding her, but I'm better than the 20-80.
Yeah.
And so they were wonderful in that way. And, the other thing is they loved me despite me, despite some of the baggage that I carried around. They loved me through that baggage. And I mean, what an incredible life lesson that I was exposed to. And so I know the reason why I went to Colorado. I don't think it had anything to do with professional reasons or what I thought I was going there for. I think God had a way bigger picture in mind.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear your story because it's not the usual, right? I mean, for me, I grew up going to St. Patrick's Church in Ravenna, New York as well. And so I was a Catholic kid growing up but really didn't have any relationship. Again, I'm grateful for the foundation my grandfather laid for me, but it wasn't
Sure.
until I was 27 or so till I
Well,
said,
I was much older than that.
right, you were older. And that was my point in going here, because I think it becomes harder when you get older because you're kind of set in your ways. So I'm curious, with those people that were surrounded.
I wasn't happy though.
You weren't. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
that's the
didn't
thing.
feel a sense of purpose tied to the right things. I wasn't, we all have gifts, the gifts of the spirit. I don't have all 10 of them. I only have a few of them, but I'm grateful that I have a few.
Mm,
And the one thing that God granted me as a gift is one, I can relate to people at their lowest moments. And I have the gift of being able to communicate in a way that authentically can create relationships. But I wasn't using those to the benefit of others. I was only using those gifts to the benefit of myself.
mm.
And I think there was an unhappiness in me. Like we had an incredible run in 2007.
Yes, you did.
And Kelly was predictive of that, by the way, because he told me that he had believe it or not, he had a vision of what was going to happen. I mean, it played out exactly
Wow.
to the tune of his vision. I kept telling him I wish he'd share with me the ability to have those visions too. I said I haven't had those in my life.
Right.
But even at the conclusion of that incredible run, I mean, I still didn't get it. I knew that there was a bigger thing involved there than any of us, but I still couldn't surrender to that the way that I needed to. And it really wasn't towards the end of my time with the Rockies, my last 3, 4, 5 years, that I really began to understand that my role is in any way, shape, or form is to help others be the best version of themselves that they could be. And then the job started to have more fun for me, but then I was at the end of it, and that's kind of I don't know how God works. I stopped trying to figure that out. I think that's when you get Christianity maturity, you realize that
Mm.
you're never going to figure any of that out. So you kind of just let it go.
How was that with relationships with your wife, with your family, with your kids? Did they start to see a change? And was there more conversations about this type of thing happening as you saw yourself kind of growing and
Yeah,
sanctifying in the Lord?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I became a much better husband than I was. I try to justify my lack of being present. And it was a real easy excuse by saying, well, look how I'm providing. I have to work this hard. I have to do the things the way I do them because, look what I'm doing for us. That was just a flat out a lie. Just an excuse to justify my own shortcomings and failures, both as a husband and a father.
Yeah.
And, once I came clean with all that, it was really liberating for us. Well, we've always had a great marriage. She's just an incredibly beautiful person inside and out. And she hung with me through all of my ups and downs of my career and my personality changes. But I left the Rockies for a lot of reasons, and I was offered to stay. I just wanted to spend more time with her because she had given up so much for me. I wanted to now do what was the right thing to do. But my kids absolutely saw a difference in me. I always, Jason, I think the greatest gift you can give your children is the gift of faith. I like to think that they saw a good enough example of that at times and a good enough example of that not at times to understand what the difference was through me. And then time, you can give them time and you can give them a good education. And, after that, it's really up to God's plan for their individual life. But I'd like to think that they saw me trying to change to become a better person, that I hope that instilled in them the ability to understand that they can do that themselves too. But only time will tell, because they've each had the road to Damascus, but they haven't had the road to Damascus yet either.
Yeah, well, we're all there, and we've all been there.
Yeah.
So it'll come forth for sure. Dan O'Dowd is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, the longtime MLB executive, former Rockies general manager. I did want to ask you about making roster changes. You're in a very difficult position as a general manager because you're judging, in essence, players on talent, potential talent, fit in the locker room, needs at positions, all of those things. And that can be difficult. I'm wondering what that was like for you and how hard it was for you to make those decisions that might draw ire both from fans and from players too.
Yeah. Early on when it was about me, I was pretty like a cold-blooded killer. And I regret that. It's one of the things I could really, if I could do it all over again, and, you don't get a chance to do that. I always could separate what I thought was in the best interest of the bigger picture. But the reality, how I translated that information to the player was probably, it wasn't until I got more mature in my own walk that I realized that that the decision I made affected people in ways that I never thought about. Like, the player is a player, but he's a human being first and foremost. And attached to that human being is a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, could be a significant other, kids. And the thing that I realized is that players don't mind tough decisions that executives have to make. They just want executives to be authentically honest with them from Jump Street. Whatever the news might be, is to communicate in a way that they know that they're always going to get the truth from you. And I can't say that I did that early on in my career, but I can say that as my career went on, I did do that. And I just wish I learned that lesson a little sooner in the process, because you do have to make difficult decisions, because you have to make what's in the best interest of the organization. I never was that influenced by media or fans, because I felt like they only saw one slice of a much larger pie. But players get it, and kind of players even get where they're at themselves, but they want to be told the truth on a consistent basis. And I think they're owed that. And I guess if I could do it all over again, I think the one thing I'd be more consistent with from day one is making sure that they knew I always had their best interest at heart, even if their best interest at heart wasn't going to be something good in the short term. Because it always, almost always works out. It just doesn't work out the way they think it's going to work out.
Yeah, for the players and usually for the organization too. What was
Correct.
the most difficult? What was the most difficult move you had to make as a GM when you think back?
My letting Clint go. Nothing even secondary to that. You know what? And Jason, I think if I could do that all over again, I think it was the right decision for Clint at that time, but I'm not sure that I shouldn't have gone with him, because we were in it together. And there was an uneasiness about me. I mean, that wasn't my decision alone. That was a collective decision. I mean, our owners were involved with that. Kelly was involved in that. And so, they collectively felt like, it was the right thing to do for Clint, but it was more importantly, it was the right thing to do for the organization at that point in time. But Clint and I were in it together. And, in hindsight, maybe I should have at that point in time said, you know what, if he's not going to be here, maybe it's time for me to move on too. Because ultimately, when you make a commitment that you're going to do something together, you make a commitment you're going to do it together one way or the other. But I don't think I was an emotionally mature enough person at that time to get that, even though, God, I was in my, late 40s, early 50s at that point. That's the thing about emotional maturity. It's not tied to age whatsoever. It's tied to your understanding of who you are rather than what the perception is of what other people think who you should be.
Have you been able to have conversations since this maturity became mature or more mature, if you will, with some of the people that you were around when you weren't as emotionally mature, and just kind of talk through some of the things that you went through?
Yeah, most recently, I had a chance to reconnect with Buddy Bell again after the tragedy with his son Mike, who was, I'm telling you, Jason, he's one of the greatest human beings. And I wasn't exposed to him like other people were. But those moments when you're in the presence of somebody uniquely is special. Yeah. You walk away from it and go, oh my gosh, that guy is like, he's got Christ in his heart in a way that I can only dream of having. Yeah. And so Buddy and I left on a really, really bad note. We had spent so many years together in Cleveland. We had formed such an incredibly relationship, but it completely fell apart between the manager and GM role, which quite honestly is the most challenging role in the game to manage day in and day out, because you just look at things from a different prism. But I reached out to him on Mike's death, and we had just incredible conversation. And I felt like that was a God-given thing. Not Mike's death, of course, but the ability to reconnect through such a tragedy, just to talk about our relationship. And, I love Buddy to death, and, my heart aches for what he goes through on a daily basis. But, I also feel like there's a purpose to everything in life. So, for me, that was a purpose that I'm very grateful for.
As we wind down, I've asked this question a lot recently, and I think it's a simple question. I don't know if it's a simple answer. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But when you think about who Jesus is right now in your life, who is that? Who is Jesus today to Dan O'Dowd?
He's my everything. I talk to him all day long. I think people think I'm nuts because, like, my kids and wife think I'm nuts because when I talk, I have a tendency to move my lips. I can't just talk. I have to move my lips. But my best days now are when I talk to him about everything, and nothing is unimportant. Anything that's on my heart, and just help me figure this one out. And it's not like he speaks to me in ways like I wish he did. Like I hear him talking back to me, but if I slow down enough, there's subtle little signs or feelings or direction that he points out that just settles me. And when days I'm not there, when days that I don't wake up and ask him to control my emotions for that day and let me do what he wants me to do, and I don't pray to put on his armor from head to toe, those days are different for me than the other days. So he's my best friend. As simple as I can put it. I realize, he is the Alpha and the Omega and everything in between, but ultimately in my eyes, he's my friend. And I can't imagine what my life would be like without having that kind of friend.
Are you involved in Bible studies and discipleship, anything like that?
I did. I just got off of one right before I call. A guy named Scott Whitaker he wrote the Tony Dungy book.
Yeah.
He and his son wrote, and he has a Bible study every week that I get on, 20 minutes each week about it. And then I'd like to get involved more. I'm like in a little transitory stage in my life where I've got to figure some things out. Purpose is interesting in life, Jason. I love what I do at the network. The thing that I miss about my previous work is that, and you worked in TV for so many years, the one thing about talent that's like an independent contractor, which is what I am, is you don't necessarily feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself, because you go in there and you do what you're been tasked to do, and then you leave. Though while you're in the building, you try to make as big a difference as you possibly can.
Sure.
but it's not the same. And I hope the one thing I still pray for is the Lord will put a dream on my heart where I'm again part of something bigger than myself, but this time making a specific difference for him. I have this saying is that, you are made by God for God. Until you figure that out, nothing else in life makes sense. And, I'm 62 years old, so I feel like I'm still really young. Maybe not for the game of baseball, but for life in general.
Yeah.
And I still pray that there's another mountain to climb, but specifically just where, I want it to be his mountain, because if he puts me on the mountain, I know he's going to walk with me side by side. If I force my way onto my own mountain, I know the journey again is going to be all by myself. And I've already been there and done that. And I don't want to do that again.
That's good. No, I feel that because I felt the same way, and I loved my career and my job at ESPN. But when I left to come to Sports Spectrum, it felt like there was a greater purpose that you described, right? Like something that's part of a bigger whole here in pointing people to Christ through sports and through media, but there's a greater purpose. And I felt that as well. And I'm young.
Yeah. And I still feel that in my heart. I don't know what any of that means, but I do pray for that every day.
Yeah.
I do pray for that every day. And, like his time frame is his time frame. Like either he's in control and on the throne or he's not. You can't have it both ways in life.
Yeah, we try. We are control freaks.
We are
by nature, right?
Yeah, we are.
So Dan, thanks so much, buddy. This was wonderful. I really appreciate your
Jason.
time, and let's connect again and let's talk soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I don't get a chance to talk about this very often. I mean, it's just in our secular society, there's just not many opportunities to openly talk about things. And I'm a big believer that you don't force things on people that don't want to hear, because that's not fair to them. And that's almost being un-Christ-like to do something like that. So it's just fun to be able to talk about it. As you can tell, I have no inhibitions about it. And I'm not sure I'm proud of it as much as I'm grateful for it. Because I think the gratefulness is the greatest thing that we can wake up with every day in our heart. Is just being grateful for what we have.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you.
All right, buddy. All right, Jason. Thanks so much. God bless.